Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Nitai Gaur Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Nitai Gaur Gauranga Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Nitai Gaur Hare Rama Gauranga Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Nitai Gaur Gauranga Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare all glories to the holy name. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Nitai Gaur Hey Gauranga Eva Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Eva Hare Gauranga Hey Gauranga Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Jaya Radha Dhamurada Radha Dhamurada Radha Whoa Radha Dhamurada Radha Dhamurada Radha Hey Jai Kishore 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 Jai Kishore Kishore Hey Kishore Kishore Jai Hai Kishore 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 Jai Kishore Kishore Hey Kishore 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 In his high car, Hari Bham, Hari Bham, Hari Bham, Hari Bham. Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur. In his high car, Hari Bham, Hari Bham, Hari Bham, Hari Bham. Hey, Nitai, Nitai, Nitai. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada Shri Radha Damodar ki jai, Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki, Sri Sri Nitai Gaur Chandra ki, Sri Prabhupada ki. To the Supreme Controller, who possesses an eternal form of blissful knowledge, whose glistening earrings swing to and fro, who manifests himself in Gokul, who stole the body that the gopis kept hanging from their rafters and then quickly jumped up and ran in retreat in fear of Mother Yasoda, but was ultimately caught. To that Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, I offer my humble obeisances.
Super excellent pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna's babyhood drowned the inhabitants of Gokula in pools of ecstasy. To the devotees who are attracted only to his majestic aspects of Narayana.
me, yeah. Well, thank you for thanking me. Thank you for being here, too. Well, my providential arrangement. Same place at the same time. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Jasodanandana Braja Janarandhana Jasodanandana Braja Janarandhana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Jasodanandana Braja Janarandhana Jasodanandana Braja Janarandhana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parividagacharya Astatara Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedānta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Śrutena tapasā vakim. Vacobhiś citta-vṛttibhiḥ. Buddhyā vakim nipuṇayā. Balenendriya-rādhasā. Śrutena tapasā vakim. Vacobhiś citta-vṛttibhiḥ. Buddhyā vakim nipuṇayā. Balenendriya-rādhasā. Śrutena tapasā vakim. Vacobhiś citta-vṛttibhiḥ. Buddhyā vakim nipuṇayā. Śrutena tapasā vakim. Vacobhiś citta-vṛttibhiḥ. Buddhyā balenendriya-rādhasā. Śrutena tapasā vakim. Vacobhiś citta-vṛttibhiḥ. Buddhyā vakim nipuṇayā. Balenendriya-rādhasā. Go ahead, one of the two of you. Śrutena tapasā vakim. Vacobhiś citta-vṛttibhiḥ. Buddhyā vakim nipuṇayā. Balenendriya-rādhasā. Śrutena tapasā vakim. Vacobhiś citta-vṛttibhiḥ. Buddhyā kim balenendriya-rādhasā. Śrutena. By Vedic education. Tapasā. By austerities. Va. Or. Kim. What is the meaning? Vacobhiś. By words. Citta. Of consciousness. Vṛttibhiḥ. By the occupations. Buddhyā. By intelligence. Va. Or. Kim. What is the use? Nipuṇayā. Expert. Balena. By bodily strength. Indriya-rādhasā. By the power of the senses. Translation. Without devotional service, what is the meaning of severe austerities, the process of hearing, the power of speech, the power of mental speculation, elevated intelligence, strength, and the power of the senses? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. From the Upaniṣads, Muṇḍaka, Upaniṣad 3.2.3, we learn. Nāyam ātmā pravacanena labhyo, na medhayā na bahunā śrutena, yam evaiṣa vṛṇute tena labhyas, tasyaiva ātmā vṛṇute tanum svam. Our relationship with the Supreme Lord is never advanced by simple study of the Vedas. There are many Mayavadi sannyasis fully engaged in studying the Vedas, Vedānta-sūtra and Upaniṣads, but unfortunately they cannot grasp the real essence of knowledge. In other words, they do not know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What then is the use of studying all the Vedas if one cannot grasp the essence of the Vedas? Krishna. The Lord confirms in Bhagavad-gītā 15:15, Vedāischa sayarvairaham eva vedyaha. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Paragraph. There are many religious systems wherein penances and austerities are greatly stressed, but at the end, no one understands Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is therefore no point in such penance, tapasā. If one has actually approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he does not need to undergo severe austerities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is understood through the process of devotional service. In the 9th chapter of Bhagavad-gītā, devotional service is explained as Raja Guhyam, the king of all transcendental knowledge. There are many good reciters of Vedic literatures, and they recite works such as Ramayana, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Bhagavad-gītā. Sometimes these professional readers manifest very good scholarship and exhibit word jugglery. Unfortunately, they are never devotees of the Supreme Lord. Consequently, they cannot impress upon the audience the real essence of knowledge, Krishna. There are also many thoughtful writers and creative philosophers. But despite all their learning, if they cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are simply useless mental speculators. There are many sharply intelligent people in this material world, and they discover so many things for sense gratification. They also analytically study all the material elements, but despite their expert knowledge and expert scientific analysis of the whole cosmic manifestation, their endeavors are useless because they cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One more paragraph. As far as our senses are concerned, there are many animals, both birds and beasts, who are very expert in exercising their senses more keenly than human beings. For example, vultures or hawks can go very high in the sky, but can see a small body on the ground very clearly. This means that their eyesight is so keen that they can find an eatable corpse from a great distance. Certainly their eyesight is much keener than human beings, but this does not mean that their existence is more important than a human being. Similarly, dogs can smell many things from a far distance. Many fish can understand by the power of sound that an enemy is coming. All these examples are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. If one's senses cannot help him attain the highest perfection of life, realization of the Supreme, they are all useless. People don't like to hear that. The Bhagavatam doesn't hesitate to say it. One of the first places in the Bhagavatam, in the answers given by Sutta Goswami, Canto 1, Chapter 2, very early. The earliest instruction section is that Chapter 2 of Canto 1, and right away, Sutta says it. Waste of time. The verse, dharmaksvanustatak pungsang vishvaksena katasoya. Note, padayad yadi ratim. What's the last line? Shrama eva hi. Kevalam. Kevalam is like definitely, absolutely useless. Unless vishvaksena kata ratim, unless there's attraction for the topics of vishvaksena. Vishvaksena indicates, it's a name of the Supreme Lord that indicates he who is beyond this place. Vishva. Vishva is the universe. Vishvaksena, he's the master of the universe. He's beyond the universe. So topics beyond the universe. So that the senses can't go beyond the universe. Senses, material senses, are awarded by the material energy for examining things of the material energy. They don't extend beyond the material energy. Just like adhoksaja, same implication. In the message of devotional service, that very nice verse, where devotional service is to be performed unto adhoksaja. It's nice understanding. Devotional service means engaging our senses in the service of the master of the senses, Vishvaksena, master of the universe, he who is beyond this universe. So how do you, same with adhoksaja, how do you use your senses to serve one who is beyond the senses? How to do that? Use your senses to serve one who's beyond the senses. By the process of devotional service, it's a descending process. It requires knowledge that's properly guided and receiving with faith. And then one can perform devotional service. At least the eligibility is there to perform devotional service and perform it properly, and you connect with adhoksaja, he who is beyond the senses, by using the senses. Or you can hear topics of the Supreme, who's the master of this universe, who is beyond the universe. You can't find him by sense inspection, but you can connect with him and thus realize him, more than find him, fully realize him through sound vibration. So Vishvaksena Kata, or Vishvaksena Kata Soya, that which is not provoking that kind of attraction, it's useless. Useless from an absolute sense. It's fair to say the mode of goodness is better than the mode of passion, which is better than the mode of ignorance. That's a relative statement. And Krishna makes that statement in Bhagavad-gītā. So relatively, goodness is better. Absolutely, they remain on the material, as we heard yesterday, they remain on the material platform, whatever it is, remains on the material platform. At best, the mode of goodness material platform, but still the material platform. From the spiritual perspective, the connection isn't made yet. Until that link with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is established. So for the most part, those that, it's pretty obvious, but those that don't have association with one who's a devotee, which means one who's connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all such endeavors are not going to reach the conclusion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because it says the math is simple. They're using instruments, the mind or the senses, or the intelligence, that are material, and the material can't enter into the realm of spiritual. The best that one can do is define spiritual by negation. It's not this, it's not this, it's not this. So the na iti, not this, neti process is very popular amongst those who are really searching for the absolute truth by the speculative method. That's the best they can come to. And it's so dry, it's hard to come to that position. Not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. It's like Prabhupada gives this example by logic to establish that all men are mortal. You've heard this one before, probably. So you can interview everybody, at least as best you can. Interview everybody. Do you know anybody that's immortal? And you just, everybody you canvass, that everybody is mortal. So you conclude everybody is mortal. But maybe there's somebody that's immortal. You just didn't interview them. Didn't get that far yet. So keep going, and all men are mortal. It's not conclusive. But by hearing from authority, it's all men are mortal. Krishna's indication is, wherever there is birth, there's death. Wherever there's death, there's again birth. Just by hearing. One doesn't need to do a survey, or by sense inspection, or by inference and logic. It seems likely that all men are mortal. It's just such a simple thing, but to understand any subject matter, the best means of understanding that subject matter is this descending method, and one who applies the ascending method to the descending process isn't going to reach. It's not possible to reach the right conclusion. Even that verse is there in Bhagavad-gītā, bahunām janmanam ante gyanavan mam prapadyate, Vāsudev sarvamiti samahatma sadurlabha. So how does one, by the intellectual process, without association of devotees, that is, one who knows the personality of Godhead by descending process, if one has, I'll just answer the question instead of asking it, one cannot come to that conclusion. It's not, say it reverse, it's not possible to come to that conclusion simply by years and years and lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes. There has to be some contact with one who's carrying that knowledge in a descending fashion. Such a fortunate person can then come to the right conclusion. Oh, Vāsudev, Krishna is everything. I'll say it again, it's not possible to reach that conclusion unless there's association with a devotee who has received that conclusion in a descending manner. It's not possible by the ascending manner. It's another way of saying what's being said here. And if you don't reach the conclusion, according to not just Srimad Bhagavatam, this quote that's here is from the Muṇḍaka Upaniṣad. Muṇḍaka Upaniṣad. It's not the very same verse. Very same verse is also in Katha Upaniṣad. Like there's that verse, 2 birds in a tree. It's in same Muṇḍaka Upaniṣad and Katha Upaniṣad. So this same verse says same thing that the Bhagavatam is saying. So it's not just, Bhagavatam's got an attitude. Bhagavatam just doesn't like speculators. The Upanishad says the same thing. And the Upanishad is like the favorite of the speculators. And it says the same thing. And guess what? They don't get it. This nāyam ātmā pravacanena labhyo. Pravacanena. Pravaca means speaking. So pravacanena labhyo. Labhyo means to obtain, to attain or obtain, to acquire. One who has acquired the ability to speak in a very erudite, polished, cool, attractive way. And through careful study, śrutena, same word as in this verse, śrutena, by assiduous study of the Shrutis, the Vedas, the Vedic wisdom, hearing, this is the translation by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, hearing Vedanta and other literature, śrutena, and then expressing them very nicely. Oh, so nicely. One who has that qualification, the Upanishad says, it's useless. Many people are attracted to that. In fact, big assemblies, or even, that's just to hear such a person, what to speak of, learn how to be such a person. That's what universities are for. Just right here in Chicago, this Professor Dimmock, during Srila Prabhupada's time, he was, whatever they call it, South Asian Studies Department. He was, he was the guy. He was, Mr. VIP in practically the whole country. One of the most prominent persons. Somehow the devotees managed to get in the first translation, or first publication, the Macmillan publication, there was a foreword by Professor Dimmock. Is that right? Best you remember? But I think it was coerced. Huh? I think his signature was coerced. Yeah, there was something. He didn't like bhakti. Oh, he didn't like bhakti. So later he said some bad things about bhakti and Bhagavad-gītā as it is, and Prabhupada's poor scholarship, and yada yada yada, offensive things. But he had a line of people. I think it was Garuda, Prabhupada disciple Garuda, studied for some time under Dimmock, and then he left and went to study in Harvard University. Because, once he found out he was an Iskcon devotee, he got the drop kick. I don't want you as a student, get out of here, basically. Something, mean like that. And so he got his PhD in Sanskrit at Harvard University. So, but, very scholarly, or without going too much into the names, Prabhupada would speak about Max Muller, or Mueller, or whatever the proper pronunciation. He has a Sanskrit dictionary that's like this, thick. Woo! And, translating many things. Scholarship that doesn't understand A, B, C. As examples, I've told this story just quickly. One of our devotees in Connecticut was giving a class at an evening class, so it's a continuing education or night school or something like that, in like a community college in Connecticut. So he's, presenting what is Bhagavad-gītā and Bhakti Yoga from Bhagavad-gītā. Somebody in the class turned out was a student of Professor Dimmock. No, Professor Stahl, another one. And he wrote the mantra on the board, and afterwards, the fellow didn't say anything. He was polite enough to not interrupt the class. But at the end of the class, he came up and put the diacritics under the R and the S and the N, all the way across the mantra. Like, you get an F in Sanskrit. He didn't say that. That's what he did, though. And she said, "Oh, you're a Sanskrit scholar, yes." And you've given everybody here the wrong information. I said, "Well, why do you say that?" He said, "Because you're teaching them." And rather than verbatim, the essence was you're teaching them to surrender to a person rather than to an imperson. And he said, "So what's the goal of the Vedas?" He said, "Yajna." And the devotee said, "Well, yajna unto whom?" And his answer was, "Not unto whom. Yajna." Okay. The devotee said, "Well, when you say sacrifice, it implies unto whom?" He said, "No. Sacrifice." Okay. It's just the act of sacrifice itself is situated in transcendence. Chapter 4, Bhagavad-gītā. Brahmarpanam brahmahavir brahmagnau brahmanauhutam. By the act of sacrifice, everything becomes situated in transcendence. So you want to connect with transcendence, you do sacrifice. Sacrifice connects you with transcendence. Not a person, according to the impersonalists, but Brahman. You realize Brahman through sacrifice. Sacrifice and Brahman are non-different. That's impersonalism. Personalism is yajna vai Vishnu, sacrifice is Vishnu. The act of the process of devotional service is not different than Krishna. But so there's this different ideology. And where does the ideology take you? According to the Bhagavatam and according to Muṇḍaka Upaniṣad, nowhere. It takes you to the material platform, to at best, a negative position of detachment from this world based upon speculation, a philosophized Brahman, not even Brahman. And what kind of shelter is that? What kind of happiness is that? What kind of support is that? It's not a Mayavadi. It's not a Brahmavadi. It's a Mayavadi. It's just imagination. Pretty sad. But they think, that's it. Imagination. Very sad. And why is that a result? Why does one go down that path? They got an attitude about Krishna. They don't want to surrender to Krishna, but they don't like, they want to be spiritual. They don't like being material. But they don't like Krishna. So they got to do that one. And so they're supplied with that one. Krishna gives them the faith, just like Krishna gives the faith to the worshipper of the demigods to get what they want. He says it in Bhagavad-gītā. He gives them the faith, and he makes their faith strong. And he tells Arjuna one shouldn't disturb that faith. But if they're missing, the Bhagavatam verses are there, and the Upanishad verse is here, that says they don't get anywhere. They get in a stratification of matter. Subtle stratification of matter. The last snare of Maya, stratification of matter. And therefore they say that about Krishna. What's Krishna for the impersonalist? Brahman covered. Even Krishna says, those who think that way, they're mudhas. But people don't like to hear mudha either. Fool and rascal. Prabhupada didn't mind saying fool and rascal. He said it over and over again, fool and rascal. And why? Because Krishna says fool and rascal. There's a whole series in Bombay of morning walk conversations with Dr. Patel, who before he met Prabhupada, he didn't have association with devotees, although he considered himself a devotee. He regularly read Dr. Radhakrishna's Bhagavad-gītā, and he would quote left and right and sideways from Prabhupada, from his Bhagavad-gītā. And Prabhupada, in the beginning, gradually he got it. But in the beginning, it was like a boxing match. Prabhupada was really letting him have it, and he was, saying, "I don't accept this. This is right, and even if I go to hell, this is right." And Prabhupada didn't relent; he just kept hammering. Because it's offensive. It's not just they got it wrong. It's offensive. And as Prabhupada was saying to Dr. Patel, this has ruined the whole of Vedic culture. So I'm being strong for that reason. And so Nārada speaking to Pracetās, a principle. They didn't read impersonal commentary on Bhagavad-gītā and Srimad Bhagavatam, so they weren't filled with poison. But he's establishing the principle that all these, some places Prabhupada calls these high-grade activities, study of the Vedas. Like, in Leela, there's Lord Chaitanya speaking or listening to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya for 7 days on śrutena, his explanation of Vedānta-sūtra as per Shankaracharya. He was super scholar, so he had it down. He knew what the arguments were, and he presented the arguments and gave the presentation. And Lord Chaitanya said nothing. So at the end of the 7th day, the 8th morning, he said, I don't know if you're understanding or not understanding, because you're not saying anything. Do you understand Vedānta-sūtra? Lord Chaitanya's reply is, I understand Vedānta-sūtra very well. But your explanation, every word you speak, it covers the meaning more and more and more. Whoa. Well, if that's the case and you understand the meaning, then you explain the meaning. So explain the meaning. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya got it. Wow. That's what it means. The direct rather than indirect meaning. Now, rather than this means that, this means this, and that means that. Direct meaning. Surrender unto me means surrender unto me. And the impersonalists say, don't surrender unto Krishna. Surrender something else. Surrender to Brahman, the unborn, unmanifest within Krishna. Then with Dr. Patel, Prabhupada said, where does it say anything like that about Krishna's inside and Krishna's outside? Rather, he says, one who thinks that way, he's a buddhyā. Avajananti mam buddhyā manushim tadamashritam. Those who think there's an inside and outside, buddhyā is a strong word, ass. He's an ass. He's a fool. Because asses are fools. And people that are ass-like, they're also fools. Even this clearly said, some other meaning. Cheating. So, it's not, and one will get the wrong conclusion unless there's association with a devotee, because it's through the association of a devotee that there's devotional service, and it's through devotional service that Krishna can be understood, not by scholarship, śrutena. Or tapasā. Within our Western country, there's this tendency, scholarship. Those that are really serious about their religion, like the Hasids, study and 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 study. Oh, they study and study. That's very prominent. And follow the law. Those two things, follow the law and study. And that's the path. Have deep faith, and they follow. Without naming the names, there's others like that. And tapasā, of course, here in the West, that's not so prominent. But in some parts of the world, severe austerity. Not just in India and other parts of the world, severe austerity. During Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time, that Bhishika Sain, one of his things was he built big fires, and then he had a big beard and long hair, and leaned over into the fires. Normally, any other person would just have burst into flames. He leaned into the fire and kept his face, his whole upper portion of his body in the fire. And then he would lean back. Then he'd do it again, and some power that came through austerity. There was something between him and fire, because when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was meant to arrest him, he shook his hair, and fire came out his hair. And he opened his eyes really big, and fire came out of his eyes. And Bhaktivinoda said, "You're a magician. I'm not afraid of you. You come with me to stand trial for your wrong deeds." And he said, "You don't know who I am. I'm Vishnu, and if I released my anger, I could ignite and destroy the whole three worlds. Fortunately, I'm very compassionate, and I won't do that." But then when he was in jail, "I'll destroy your family," and his daughter got fever, and a schoolhouse burned, and he had this thing with fire. But when they cut his hair, he fell to the ground. And when the final sentence was made, the description is there, the assistant in the courtroom, as they took him by the arm and were taking him to the prison, they had scissors, and they cut his long hair. And when the hair was cut, he fell to the ground because he hadn't eaten or had water for 18 days. He was austere, but he certainly wasn't transcendental. And after 2 weeks in jail, he took poison and died. Wasn't very transcendental at all. Tapasā. Śrutena tapasā va kim. What's the use? Or vacobhiś. Expert in making explanations of whatever. In this case, it's scriptures. But, say the puffy-wuffies at the university that study whatever they study and present it very eloquently. Same thing. Vacobhiś and pravacanena in this verse that's in the Purport. One may be able to do that very nicely. Very skilled. Reciters of Ramayana, reciters of Bhagavatam, reciters of Bhagavad-gītā. Ramabhadra was sharing this with me. He's made an audio book, Bhagavad-gītā. He's been working on this for a year. I mean, his office is right next to my office, and he practices for hours and he has a recording studio, and so you'll see when he does the deity worship seminar, he's really into it, whatever he's into. And he made he shared with me, he met somebody who has done, since she was a little girl, now she's an older lady. From a little girl, she had memorized Bhagavad-gītā and made presentations on Bhagavad-gītā, recordings of Bhagavad-gītā, and She became famous through reciting Bhagavad-gītā. Not that she understood what it meant, but she was famous in reciting it. And she heard Ramabhadra's presentation, and she said, "This is fantastic." I didn't meet her. This is his sharing. I'll help you market the thing. I know how to do that. Great. Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gītā as it is. But it's not just the verses, it's the meaning behind the verses. Because the potency comes from that. The potency comes from bhakti, or purity is the force. And without that purity, where's the force? It's going to take one somewhere on the field of the material energy. Somewhere. But from the absolute perspective, useless. Citta-vṛttibhiḥ. Citta means consciousness, and vṛttibhiḥ, the ability to get the important meanings, the essences from things. So that's something that intellectuals are really good at. They can abstract something and present that something and speak about that something in abstract terms, and then go back and plug it into the place of reference. So they can, if one has that gift, that power, they still doesn't take them to the conclusion. The personality of Godhead, who's the source of everything. Krishna remains elusive. Nāyam prakāsya sarvasya yogamaya samāvrita. Again, mudhoyam. He reserved the right to not disclose himself to those that are of that mentality. So they may have that skill. Years and years and years and years and years and lifetimes of being able to have, that's basically what IQ is. It's abstractions from something. That's what intelligence is, to discern this from that, to discriminate this from that. So supposing one has that capacity, this from that, rather than say this is that and that is this, they can understand to some degree. Still, Krishna is distant. He's at Hoksaja. He's Vishvaksena. He's beyond the range of these faculties to approach. Buddhyā, great intelligence. I think we've all met some people in the course of our lives that are highly intellectual. Again, without devotional service, it's a zippo. It's another zero in front of another zero in front of another zero. It all amounts to zero. So the Bhagavatam is giving us this perspective. Generally speaking, people are living in this zero land, and here's somebody that's got a lot of zeros. Looks like, wow, let's go worship that person and respect that person and sit at the feet of that person and hear all the zeros. But the receiver of the Bhagavatam isn't enamored by so many zeros. I just heard Prabhupada's explanation of a little embellishment to that scene where Swarup Damodar, when he was still working on his PhD, there was a presentation, a man from, this is Prabhupada's explanation, from the University of California at somewhere, Berkeley or one of those places out there in California, and he had just won the Nobel Prize, and it was on chemical evolution, made a whole presentation on chemical evolution, a multiple-part presentation. At the end of the first part, Swarup Damodar said, if I give you the chemicals, if I give you the elements that make up chemical evolution, can you create life? And the man's reply was, I can't do that. And Prabhupada's comment was, the next presentations, nobody came. You're saying blah, blah, and then they ask you, because the scientific method is experiment and observation. You've got a conclusion. Where's the experiment and observation? Here's the chemicals. Can you create life? To reach this conclusion. No, I can't do that. The emperor has no clothes. So one may be highly intellectual, but it's a zero. And a number of zeros is also zero. Then the last part, the senses. Balena, bodily strength. Okay, some people have a lot of bodily strength and they really work on making that bodily strength, more. Or sensual strength. And Prabhupada's comment is, dogs and cats and fish and eagles and vultures have stronger sense power than humans. So one may have that capacity. Without devotional service, and devotional service means several things, the sambandha abhideya prayojana, the proper understanding of basically what's what, the connection of all things with the Supreme, connecting those things with the Supreme through the medium of making offerings under the Supreme, and the stage of perfection, spiritual love for Krishna beyond the material platform. If that's not there, all these nice list of things that people chase after, if they're striving for something, it's useless. And the world is made up of so many useless things that it's phantasmagoria, and there's this type and that type and the other type of phantasmagoria, and on and on and on it goes. That's, whether it's just as the previous purport spoke of material or spiritual, spiritual meaning, not the Krishna conscious kind of spiritual, but the worldly kind of spiritual, the by negation spiritual. This kind of stuff, śrutena, tapasā, vacobhiś, citta-vṛttibhiḥ, buddhyā, balenendriya-rādhasā, stays on the material platform. Once having a taste for devotional service, a devotee doesn't like that. Just got a letter from somebody that started their college education in September. And they heard, the level of degradation, but when they experienced the level of degradation, they were just shocked. Grew up in a nice family, well protected, nice. And then, into the cesspool of degradation. Shocking. How to deal with this was their question. But, whether it's the degradation of the mode of ignorance kind, or the degradation of the mode of passion kind, or the degradation that's the so-called mode of goodness kind, degradation in the sense of speculation and these things, maybe somebody will be attracted to these things, but the Bhagavatam is telling us don't be attracted to these things. They're useless. Minus devotional service. But when devotional service is there, then lasting benefit is there, eternal benefit is there. The potential of coming to the concluding position of the goal of life is there. So take that to your capacity. Hare Krishna. I'll end and see if there's some comments. Ashraya?
You were discussing the speculator who comes to the impersonal conclusion. And for whatever reason, I thought of those of us who are on the other side, maybe have some piety or whatever. Persons.
Maybe they were what?
persons who have some piety, they're pious people as opposed to the impious people. They're trying to understand the Supreme. When pious people come to spiritual life, they are, and this is my observation and experience, they're looking for Krishna. They're looking for a personal relationship.
Okay.
Excuse me. And as much as the impersonalists are kind of blind to the reality that there is a person, we a lot of times are looking for the perfect person blindly. So, and that's kind of a place where we start.
I can't follow what you're saying.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the sound system, but I can't follow what you're saying.
Is it hard to hear? Or?
Can anybody... You having a hard time following?
I don't know.
Okay, so it's...
Okay. Maybe farther.
I don't know, but keep it real simple.
Okay.
Do your best and speak clearly. Sorry.
Okay. I'll try.
There are some sincere people that come to devotional service looking for a relationship with God, and then what? They have this equipment called speculation, and they're using the flashlight to look for God.
Or more so, I feel like it's just the desire to have that relationship.
Okay.
And that we project that on others.
We reject or project?
Project.
We project that on others.
Yeah.
What do we project on others?
The ideal of God.
The ideals of God.
Seeing, we want to find God in a person, someone else. We have the desire.
We project that on others.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't get it. Yeah. Onto a person or onto God?
Onto a person. They want a desire for a perfect relationship with a perfect person.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Hey.
Yeah.
How come I can understand when he says it? But you understand each other, I guess. Okay. That's not perfect.
That part I didn't get to yet.
So where are we going with this?
Yeah. So next, I'm just trying to give the image. I don't know. I can't do it very well, apparently. But so,
I'm used to having translators.
Okay.
I've been
okay. Makes me feel
Chinese and Hindi and Telugu and Americans.
Yeah.
Go ahead, keep going.
Just proves your transcendental position very much. Okay. Okay. So, how much is that something that we need to deal with right away in Krishna consciousness?
How much is that something we should deal with right away in Krishna consciousness? That's your question? Well, I don't know how to answer that question. It's not something. There are many things that we need to deal with, and if you try to get out, if you try to go there right away with somebody that's just coming into Krishna consciousness, they don't have. Say from my personal experience, I realized within the first 2 weeks of living in a Hare Krishna temple in Boston that I didn't have the capacity to understand who's advanced. I was, as you described, projecting an image of what I thought was advanced. And in 2 weeks, well, maybe a little bit longer, the person who I thought was up there, he left. And I realized I don't have the capacity. So no one had to teach me that one. Just life taught me that one. And it was humbling. I don't have the qualification. Doesn't mean that there aren't such persons, but I just don't have the qualification. So instead, let me understand the message of the Scripture. That's where I went with that one. Oh, your question was how much needs that to be dealt with right at the very beginning? I don't think it's, we need a big banner that as people enter the temple and, every class we give, we make sure that people don't make that mistake. I don't think that's like the priority. It's something that in course of time it'll be understood and it can be explained as we go along in course of time, but the priority thing is the message of Bhagavad-gītā and the holy name and becoming humble in a mood of service and working on those things right away. That's what I think. Yes, Jai Jagannath?
A message we commonly hear in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Sometimes on a personal level, I get a little concerned because I think of the definition of bhakti by Rupa Goswami, anyabhilashita shunyam. And although I'm trying to engage in a favorable aspect of it, anukuyena, the anyabhilashita shunyam part isn't there. So I often wonder, although I'm practicing Krishna consciousness and trying to improve myself, I see my consciousness is very much not anyabhilashita shunyam. And I get very much concerned about my ultimate, let's say, success in Krishna consciousness.
Ultimate what?
Success.
Success.
And my development of Krishna consciousness.
Well, I comment on that message you just shared. The concern is itself part of the process of getting there to anyabhilashita shunyam. Many people take up devotional service because from the lower strata, I don't like to suffer. And when my suffering diminishes, then I become complacent till I start to suffer again, and then I start to become a little more attentive. And your point is, that's not sufficient. It's anyabhilashita shunyam. That's the statement of the scripture, and I'm not there. So recognizing I'm not there and is the beginning, and then making some steps to amend, like let me be more attentive rather than complacent, even when things are going well. Because that's not the goal, it's just feeling comfortable. So it's part of the process of coming to the anyabhilashita shunyam stage. It's surrender is proportionate. It's there's a scale. Like there's an absolute surrender. It's either a 1 or a 0. It's proportionate. It's scalable. And this realization, I'm not there yet, is an impetus to go further. At least the opportunity is there, if I can realize I'm not there yet. Because otherwise, frankly, many persons aren't paying attention to that. They're just wanting to be comfortable. So keeping the association with those that are either on their way or there, or more there than I am, that's good. That will help strengthen the commitment to anyabhilashita shunyam. And, getting slapped around a little bit, that also helps by Krishna's kindness, just like banging us on the side of the head. Sure, then Chandriya. Yeah, go ahead, do your follow-up. Yeah. Yeah. I had some thoughts on that, which I was planning to discuss with you on the ride to Champaign-Urbana. And in many cases, the primary association is through Vani. And through Vani, one can have very strong personal association through Vani. You know Kurmarupa, Vrindavan? He was involved in the Gurukul in Vrindavan for some time, and then now he's with cow protection. Kurmarupa? No, I don't know. Real good with graphics. He makes graphic designs very, 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 very beautifully. So, he was never in the physical presence of Srila Prabhupada his whole life in Krishna consciousness. And he's very strong devotee. Very good. Paka. Strong devotee. How did that happen? You know, I know some of the history, and he was with some persons that were, anyway, without going into detail, not the best association. Although at some point in time, apparently good association, but not the best association. Paka devotee. By hearing. That's like contemporary. And then, you know, there are others that just by hearing. Just by hearing. Prabhupada. And others in our Vaishnava line. And then one can go, oh, well, you know, they're exceptional. And I'm not exceptional. But the answer to that is they became exceptional through their adherence to the principle of Vani. Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes that Sarup Damodar came. This is the end of Bhagavad Arkam Marichimala. He came and instructed him to write the book, told him how to write the book, and told him, I'm going to give you a very special explanation of the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. He wrote that at the very end of the book, saying, normally these things are not disclosed, but I'm going to disclose it for the purpose of appreciation of this mercy that I received. And he discloses it. Vani. Why? Because of his commitment to Vani. And who was his association? You know, at that time, the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had gone way down. But some arrangement was made. When he was something like 43, between 43 and 45 years of age, he went to Vrindavan and met Jagannath Das Babaji. That was his association. Before that, it was just teachings. So we can, one can look at a life of such a person either this way or that way. One was he's a perfected soul that came to show an example of how it can be done. And another is he was one of us and he became a perfected devotee. In either way, whether he's showing or doing, Vani. And Krishna made some arrangement. 45 years old, with all kinds of other negativity, like big-time negativity with what his association was when he was growing up. Didn't even have a Bhagavatam to read, with no commentary even, until he was 31. So we're protected. We've got ample Vani, and we can associate that way. And something that's on a more physical vapu level, the desire for such association, it'll be arranged. We can discuss some more. Jitendriya.
You were relating with some of these scholars that have kind of come in contact with the movement, and some of them are no longer around, but and some of them weren't so favorable, and some of them were. I was just wondering, I know this Stilson Judah, I think he passed away, is that correct? Dr. Stilson Judah?
Yeah, I know the name.
Yeah, and he passed away, I guess, not too long ago, but I was wondering, this one fellow that was pretty friendly with the movement, his name was Harvey Cox. Is he still around?
I don't know.
Because
he was quite old, but I haven't heard his name mentioned, so I'm assuming he's gone. Yeah. We have connections with the Harvard Divinity School, and his name is not mentioned anymore.
Oh, okay. Because I just found an old BTG, about 30-year-old one, and he was in there, and he was giving us a little, Do you remember those things that he wrote about the movement?
I was in his house once in Cambridge. Direct exchange.
Yeah.
It was shortly after his Secular City book was published.
Yeah, I have that book.
And he was expressing in person, the Hare Krishna movement isn't like that. And cautioning us, don't go down that path, as Christianity had gone down that path. Secularism.
And then there was that other fellow that from Iowa. He was he had glasses, and they had it was like a dual commentary. Like I don't know. I can't remember.
You're fishing for the name, but I can't remember the name.
Yeah. Well, it'll come to me someday.
Okay. Okay. Ashraya, and then we'll end.
I'm just following up from the other question. So based on your response, I personally feel uncomfortable knowing that people may be looking at me that way, or I feel that I've had bad experiences doing that. So, and I feel that it helps me when somebody has told me something that helped me to get over that a little bit. So from my side, besides becoming perfect, what is it that I can do to help people overcome disappointment or overestimation or those kinds of things that can also be harmful because you have wrong expectations, that kind of thing.
Okay, and I'll say the same thing again. You should, I should, each of us should be not pretentious. You wish to make a disclaimer, that's fine. Some persons may think, this is just a sign that he's way up there because he's so humble. He's always making these disclaimers. But just look at him, he's so humble. So, the real thing is not just making disclaimers. The real thing is being not pretentious. The essence is inside, not outside. And you do something outside, people may still make their projections. So don't be pretentious. You don't have to bend over backwards to be not pretentious, because that's another something that's on the. So just act according to your position, and it's the reality is it's not this perfect thing up there, and you don't have to pretend to be in order to help people become Krishna conscious. Rather, just be realistic about things. The real issue is faith. And our service is to be nurturers of faith. And one of the points, so the point that you're making is, if they misplace their faith by projecting something that I am not or others are not, then it can damage their faith. And the other can damage their faith also. Go the other direction. And so the real essence is nurturing of faith. It just don't be pretentious. But cultivate humility. Well, I'm not humble. Cultivate humility. That's not pretension. Cultivate humility. And avoid the other. And do that sincerely. Just do that, and that's nice. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.